right. So thank you so much for joining us for our last conversation around the new leader. So this is Akua here, and we're also joined by Tiffany and Angelica. And I said that wrong, Angelica. I'm so sorry. And today what we want to discuss is the rise of the new leader. And I think maybe we can start off with Angelica. What does the new leader look like?
So I think the new leader is going to look a lot different than people imagined. There used to be like this command and control mindset that people thought would work in organizations. I command you to do something, I control your work, therefore you do as I say and it'll be correct. But we're starting to realize with 2020 that that's not going to keep your organization afloat. And honestly, it'll probably sink your people team or whoever you're working with. So I think now the new leader is going to be a lot more about like decentralizing that and empowering people to really bring their whole selves to work and really be who they are. Somebody who also is going to embody that. You can't ask people to bring their whole selves to work if you are still not bringing your whole self to work. You can't ask people to be authentic or vulnerable if you're only sharing, the highlights of your life. If you're not sharing, hey, this is what I'm struggling with as a leader. So I think that's what we're going to see as somebody who is self-aware and confident enough to say, even though I'm in this title, I still go through the same things that you do. And how can we move forward as a team?
I really like that. And I really like this idea also of modeling the behavior that we expect of others. I think one of the things I love to tell my clients that I work with is that, your employees see, they hear what you're saying, but they also see your actions and your behaviors as well. And if they see that those two things aren't necessarily matching, you're going to miss out on a lot of that opportunity to influence and a lot of that opportunity to get some things done, simply because you seem not genuine, right? You seem inauthentic. So thank you for sharing that. Tiffany, anything you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I think I love the points that the two of you have pinned down for us. I think also it's collaboration. It's the new leader knows they know where maybe some of their opportunities lie, but they also can leverage their strengths and they can use that to influence people and use their authority, because we've talked about before where you have somebody with a title. And so that comes with its own set of influence and authority, power. And then you have those who don't have a title. So the new leader knows how to pull the right people around the table. They know how to build those partnerships. And maybe I'm being selfish by saying this, but HR being one of those. How does the new leader partner with HR? How do they partner with other leaders and other key stakeholders? I think for me, that has definitely been a pinnacle of the rise of the new leader and the strong leader. And we talked a little bit before about how now when we're all remote, you don't have that physical authority and power to pull somebody into a conference room or to share maybe your thoughts or have that conversation. So leaders have lost a little bit of that power, but it doesn't mean you still can't influence. It's where you focus and where you choose to focus in that area. I think that matters, and that strikes up that new leader definition for me.
I really like that. So really bringing into what Angelica was talking about in terms of having that self-awareness to recognize we're not in that same space anymore, right? What used to work, that status quo isn't going to work anymore. And I love, this sort of image of like physically, right? We can no longer sort of bring people into these different spaces for them to recognize the power that we have. Right now, everyone's in their own space and has to really be able to connect and get things done very differently as well. And I think this is also a really good segue to talk about how do we influence without having that, that leadership title. That's something that you sort of alluded to, both Tiffany and Angelica. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Influencing or having, that leadership ability without having maybe that title.
Yeah, I think, for the longest time, we always thought leaders had to have that title, if it's like a manager, a director, or vice president. And what we're realizing now is that there are leaders in your organization that don't have these titles. They could be people who have the ability to lead other people on the path that they are looking for. They have the ability to understand what people are going through. They have the ability to really connect with people and understand what people need to do the best work. And so I think it is important to realize that there are leaders that do not have titles. And even us as employees, you can still be a leader even if you don't have a title. And it's all about balancing that with your team to make sure that you're not kind of going back to that command and control mindset, but you're actually empowering and, like Tiffany said, collaborating with people to bring about the correct end. And like Tiffany said as well, that also means being able to collaborate with other departments, with other, with other titled leaders, I guess I would call them, the people who have the title. You have to be able to know how to work with them. And I think, kind of to Tiffany's point about, being able to collaborate in HR, we have to be able to understand we are leaders. And I think that's something that HR has struggled a lot with, is this feeling of, well, I don't have a seat at the table, I'm not a leader. But the thing is, do you know what the business needs? Or are you only answering what HR needs? So I think, that's something that people are going to have to think about, is understanding each other's needs and how you can work together to get there.
Oh my gosh,
Thank
I
you.
love that.
Yeah.
I love it. That's so true.
Go ahead, Tiffany. Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a good point, because that happens so much in HR, and we feel like, oh, I haven't been given a seat at the table. Well, do you know the business? To your question, Angelica, that's important. We have to know the business. And that makes you a rising leader. I'll be honest, that's how I've gotten promoted in my HR career, is by knowing the business and getting that respect of the stakeholders, getting the respect of my leadership team, being deemed a leader. And I was like, I'm not a leader. I don't have that title. But you do, because you have the ability to influence. And for me, what also helped is to be able to, job enrichment is a thing. And that is how you can get those skills. Not all moves have to be vertical. They can be across. And there's so much, you see people switching roles, job sharing. There's so much information that comes through that collaboration process, so much diversity and richness. You could sit on a board, you can be, you can join your employee resource group. There are so many different ways that we can get that information and become leaders and influencers in our circle, not those kinds of influencers, but in our respective circles, and still have that type of leadership authority. And I think too, just to add on, would be like connection, that connection and empathy to people. Angelica touched on connection and empathy. That's one of the pieces that the new leader has to have. We can't make our own assumptions and project our stuff onto other people. We have to really meet people where they're at in order to develop them and move them forward in the best way that suits them.
Great. And thank you so much for bringing up this idea of, HR sort of reaching out sort of beyond their department to have a better understanding of how the business works, right? And that will actually make them, better recruiters, help them really think about what the culture needs and all of that. And on the flip side, right? Because, I mentioned before in our conversation before we started recording, like, I'm one of those leaders that didn't necessarily have the best relationship, with HR, right? Recognizing that they were important, but never taking the time to really understand from the point of view that, it's true, they're not always included and they don't always feel included. So making sure that I do bring them to the table and include them in some of my bigger decisions, especially business decisions, so they understand really what I need. So yeah, that was, I think, a really, really great point. And I just wanted to, I guess, sort of reflect back some of the things I'm hearing in terms of the traits. So I hear connection a lot. I hear collaborating, empowering really as an important trait for that new leader. Self-awareness, I think, is really something that we've talked about in all three conversations a lot. Looking outside your position, right? Not feeling like, okay, this is what I do, this is what's on my job description, I'm just going to focus on here, but going beyond that. And then this idea sort of empathy, which I think also is really well connected to the self-awareness and sort of emotional intelligence. Anything else you would add to that list?
No, I think just like Tiffany said, the focus on, connection is a big thing. How are you connected, and making sure that you understand different areas outside of yourself. But other than that, I think those are the core tenets of a new leader.
Yeah, I'd agree. That's a nice, healthy list.
Yeah. Any thoughts or like maybe some specific practical steps we can give people who are listening to this or watching this and how they can maybe build some of these skills. Because it's a little scary, right? When you're in an organization, I feel like a lot of us are told to like, stick to your people, stick to your department, just focus on that. Any thoughts on how to break free of that and really get to know what's happening outside of your own silo?
Yeah, I mean, as a dispatcher, we would do ride-alongs with police officers. Police officers would do sit-alongs with us. And so I think that really helped shape my view that you don't know what somebody's doing until you do it. So really take the time to learn about the business. What do other people in departments do? Could you do a virtual sit-along? Like sit along with people in a virtual way and ask them about their day. What are the key things they do? How do those play into what you do? So like for HR, how could you help somebody else in another department be better at their job? What do they need? But also, how does that tie back to the overall business strategy? Because at the end of the day, like you have to know what the business strategy is. Otherwise, you're going to be solving problems that really don't make an impact on the business. They make an impact on HR, which is great. Yes, but we have to make sure that we're still making an impact on the business. We're answering that business need. And the only way to do that is to get outside of your bubble. Make sure you're meeting people, understand where they're coming from, understand what they need, speak their language is another thing. So, that doesn't mean go out and like invest in a marketing certification or go into engineering, but you should know what people do because it's easy to be on the outside. In anthropology, it was called armchair anthropology, where people would sit in their armchairs and make assumptions about what Native people did without actually going there. And so that's kind of what happens in HR is we tend to just make these generalizations and assumptions of what people need because we're on the outside, yet we don't really know how to help them until we get there. So really make sure you're not sitting in your armchair, whether that's in your home office or when you go back, and really make the effort to get out.
Great, thank you for that. Tiffany, any thoughts?
I think being open to opportunity. So for me, I've had a very crooked career path is how I always describe it. So when you leave yourself open to those opportunities, you don't know what may come your way. If you're seen as the resident expert in engineering, for instance, then people will start to come to you. You will build a brand, and that's a lot of what that is, and a lot of what leadership is. And when you talk about the new leader, is building that type of brand that everyone wants to be drawn to and that they are drawn to. So I think that's very important as well. When you're in this collaborative space, just kind of taking that in and bringing in new perspectives. We talked a lot about collaboration, stakeholders, listening to the business, pulling in those different voices is very key because we can all be great at what we do, but what makes us better is the strength of others and pulling in diverse perspectives. So that I would add on to that and to the great things that Angelica shared too.
Amazing. Yeah. So what I'm hearing a lot of is engagement. This idea of being open to engaging, getting your feet maybe a little dirty if necessary, and just being open to new experiences and seeing it from a different perspective. And I agree. I think that's a huge part of being able to influence and being able to lead, right? Just being able to see the other side will allow you to come up with those, interesting opportunities or those creative opportunities that are a win-win, right? Because if not, you'll just see it from your perspective and not really be able to collaborate because you won't really have an understanding or be able to empathize with the other side. I love it. Yeah. All right. Well, any last words based on this conversation, based on, this 3-part series that we've had the opportunity to do together?
Yeah, I think that just remember that you don't have to have a title to be a leader, and it's really your decision to step out and make that decision and know what you stand for, and be aware that just because you get a title or you have a certain position, that doesn't mean you stop growing. I think that's something that happens a little bit is that once you get to a certain place, it's like, okay, I'm done, but that's not really what needs to happen. Like you really need to keep learning and growing because the world is changing, business is changing, HR is changing. And if you're so stuck on getting to a certain place and just getting there and being happy with that, you'll end up being left behind because you're not understanding your role is still to learn and grow. So make sure that you're not becoming complacent in wherever you are and in your leadership position.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Tiffany?
Yeah. And I would say bringing others along with you and helping to develop them. That's really the role of the new leader versus I'm the task manager and I do. How are you really engaging and retaining your team? How are you building them up to the next level? Those are the leaders who I see as very, very successful, as they're able to bring along others. They don't take it personally when someone's growing underneath them. That's a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. And so I think checking that ego at the door and not thinking you have to know everything. We've talked about all those things before too, and being open to you're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, but not thinking that you have to know everything or pretending like you have to put on this facade to pretend you know everything, because that doesn't serve us well.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think well said. And I have to say, you know, from my end, thank you both so very much for yeah, just taking the time and being open to have these conversations. I really enjoyed it. And yeah, I look forward to our continued conversations in the future.
Likewise.
Yes,
Thanks,
thanks.
ladies. It's been great.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.